This life follows you, clings to you, infecting everyone comes close to you. We are cursed, you and I.
On that, we agree. People keep asking if I'm back, and I haven't really had an answer. But now, yeah, I'm thinking I'm back.
Wow, that is as heavy as it gets. Mark Lehman, we're back.
We're back. Speaking of back, Ben, I think when last we talked, we had mentioned that both our games had kind of winded down, and we were looking at maybe not having a game for a while, at least running a game, right?
Yeah, that's what we said.
Yeah, but we're kind of back, right?
I think we're back. What are you doing now?
I think it lasted all 2 weeks.
Yeah, I didn't think you were going to stay away. I didn't think you can stay away.
No.
What do you tell everybody what you're running right now?
Well, I'm not running anything at the moment. We're trying to get something up and started.
We've had a session 0.
Yeah. There's kind of an interesting conversation about that, to be honest with you. I had a session 0 I ran for another group of friends, and we had been kind of sitting around with our Monday night crew without a game. And so I was like, you know what? I'm kind of running this other game. I could run it for you guys as well, since I'm doing all the work, right?
So in other words, you already have the maps, you already have the enemies set up and the encounters. So why not run a second party?
Might as well. That's what I was thinking. So I ran this game for this other group, and I'm not kidding you, Ben. It was probably the worst session 0 I've ever ran in my life.
Why was it a bad session?
It felt like I was talking the whole time. Like I couldn't get anything out of them. I would set up scenarios, and it was like crickets. I felt like a comedian just bombing on stage. And
Wow.
at one point I swore a tumbleweed just went by, and I was like, well, this is as bad as it can get. And I ran almost the same scenario for you and a few other friends, and it could not have been different.
Could not have been more different. Yeah.
No, it was like you guys were running the table. I just threw some stuff out there, and you guys were running with it, and I just kind of had to sit back and enjoy it. And it was so wildly different. I couldn't believe it.
Well, we've always said here on Tabletop Tune-Up that what is really the kind of the core of this thing is this 3-part interaction between the players and the GM and the dice. And so, the players have to kind of step up, and they've got a lot to contribute to these things. So
yeah.
Interestingly, you've had these 2 different kind of session 0s, but they're not exactly the kind of session 0 a lot of people might be thinking of, right? Where you get people together and you talk about what you're going to do in the game. Mark, you ran session 0s that were narratives, that were like mini adventures, dare I say. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted everybody to have like an experience together before they actually get to the table to play. Something they could kind of as a memory draw upon, and then build their backstories from that point on. Like, so basically what I did in this game is I ran like a little narrative adventure from ages 1 through 10. And you guys all met at age 10. And the idea was you guys would have like a little shared experience. And then from that point on, wherever that story left, you would then create the backstory from that point forward.
Right. And this is my clever way of getting to our topic for today, which is on player character backstories.
Backstories. And kind of like, as we're talking about this, we want to talk about like what makes for a good backstory, both for a player and also for a game master. Like what makes What makes a game master excited when he reads your backstory, and what completely doesn't work?
This is one of those things where it's so rare that you get just exactly the right kind of, I think about this in terms of like the density. So rare that you get the right kind of length or detail in it. I've had games where I've had players who they were like, I am a halfling thief or something like that. I'm like, cool, what's your backstory? Well, I'm a thief. Well,
I
what's your
thiefy.
background? I grew up as a street urchin. Okay,
Mhm.
great. So you're a street urchin. You're a thief. Do you have any interesting characters in your background? I don't know. Did you have a
Yeah,
mentor somewhere that helped you gain all this craft that you have?
yeah.
And the player already can hear that you're searching for hooks for adventures for them.
Mhm.
So that's one whole kind of category is the people who are like, this character is to them a set of mechanics. On
Mhm.
the other end, I've had people crafting backstories that ran multiple pages and had highly detailed origin stories and all of these accomplishments. And I've had to be like, listen, dude, that's all great stuff, but
You're
that's
level 1.
10 levels from now. Yeah.
You're level 1, dude. You haven't done anything.
Yeah.
Um, let's start real quick talking about like why we might want a good backstory
Okay. Yeah.
versus because there's some
What does
games you
this
don't need
do
it.
for you?
Yeah,
Okay. Well,
I
that's interesting, actually. So, well, yeah, in the why, make sure you tell us about when you don't need a good backstory.
well, you don't necessarily need a big backstory if you're not having any sort of intention to play a long campaign.
Right. Okay.
You might be playing a 3-shot or a 4-shot, and it might be nice to, but the DM's not going to be drawn upon your backstory for plot hooks for the campaign because we're not running a campaign. We're running an adventure.
Yeah, when we talk about Broken Compass coming up, that's a game that is all about action, adventure. It's forward looking, it's going fast, and whatever kind of backstory you want, you kind of just drop it in bit by bit here and there. You do not need to write up a biography of this person before they started adventuring.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, really, you want to get the points back. If you do have a backstory, the backstory should only inform your character as far as how you're going to play it at the table, not necessarily like inform the GM of like what he should be looking for when crafting this game. Because he's already. Let's assume that if we're running a small adventure, that game is already crafted.
Yeah,
There's not a
that's
whole
right.
lot of room for improvisation for somebody's long lost backstory.
Okay. So that's when you don't need a backstory. Is you're doing sort of like a high action, short run, something that doesn't really reward a lot of layering in of the character story into the narrative. So when we do want backstories, though, tell me about more of that. Like, what is it that what are we doing with the player backstory as a GM?
So if we're running a campaign, let's say we're going to have any length of a campaign, it could be anywhere from, I would say 1 to 10. It could go 1 to 20, whatever length it's going to be. Usually a pretty long running game that might run a year or two. You're going to want to have a backstory to which you can draw ideas from. You want a character, each character should have their own story arc within the overall campaign story arc. And you want to pick those little seeds that they've given you in their backstories so that you could plant those so they can grow later in the game.
Yeah. So now you're talking about these seeds. I want to come to that in a moment, but one of the things I wanted to revisit just for a second was the thing you were talking about of like how many levels or how long the campaign needs to be. I think the relevant thing here, I don't think I'm disagreeing with you, but I think the relevant thing here is that you've got to have enough time to have a beginning, middle, and an end. I think
Yes.
you could do that if you had 3 to 5 levels even, but
Mhm.
obviously the shorter it is, the less time you have to develop that, and the more of a kind of a pain it is to try to squeeze everything in. So
And if you have 4 or 5 players, each one of those are going to have their own moments, and it's really difficult to do that if you're only running a game for a short period of time.
right. That's a good point too, is everybody's got to get some screen time. And
Mhm.
by the time you've done servicing all the screen time that everybody needs in that game, well, you probably already just got 2 or 3 levels.
Yeah. That's kind of why we're developing a backstory. That's why we're asking for a backstory, because we want the players to. This is an opportunity for them to tell the GM what they'd like in a game.
So talk about that. When you talk about like seeds, what kinds of things, let's imagine that we're going to build a backstory for a moment. I'm going to make up a PC character here and you tell me what kinds of things I need to get into this to story to make it a good backstory. Let's just borrow a little bit from this current game that we're working on. I am going to create a Ganassi. He is going to be a wizard and we need to build a backstory for him. He's going to
Mhm.
live in a kind of, kind of an exotic, deserty place. Think Arabian Nights or something like that, right? Um, what kinds of things should I be trying to get into his background to give him something that you as a GM can work with later?
Well, there's a few things I would always recommend every player start by looking at the class they want to play. In your case, you want to play a wizard,
Right.
but that's not just a wizard. At some level, like a level 3 in D&D, you get to select a subclass. I also want to know what your subclass that you're thinking of is going to be. And I
Okay.
want you to be thinking of what that subclass is going to be, because I want you to be pointing in the direction of that subclass, because something should be guiding you to choose that subclass. And if you're not thinking about it at level 0, I want to be thinking about it. I want to be planning for that moment when you select whatever subclass that might be.
Right. So there should be narrative elements in my backstory that maybe start to pick out that stuff. If I'm going to be an abjurer,
Mhm.
that is to say, a wizard that specializes in defensive magic, then I probably want to have some experiences where I felt vulnerable or unprotected,
Mhm.
and maybe magic is a way that
Yeah.
I'm trying to.
Why would you select that class? Because
Right.
I at one point felt vulnerable. So your backstory should reflect that. There should be
Right.
something in there that points in that direction.
So part of it's career. I think another thing would be relevant here would be like key relationships, right? I
Mhm.
should have mentors or parents or childhood friends or maybe even somebody who did me wrong early in life that maybe
Mhm.
then we can develop later. Talk a little bit about what kinds of things you're looking for as a GM in those cases.
Well, you could have. I mean, I'm thinking about I'm thinking about one of the characters I made, and I always wanted to kind of see this grow and through a port of through a campaign. It never actually happened because it never came to be.
And didn't take
But
off, huh?
but I had this character that had this thing about he had rivals. He didn't have
Okay.
enemies, but he had rivals that he was competing with to be the best in his guild. And it was kind of a little bit like Indiana Jones and Belloc.
Oh,
Like
okay.
he had a rival. And I always thought that would be kind of
Competitors.
fun to have a rival and not somebody who was a villain to me.
Yeah.
Um, and so I wrote in his backstory that he had these rivals out there, people he was jealous of, people he was he was convinced they were stealing his technology and stuff. I thought that would have been, as a player, I thought, man, that would be a fun thing to have happen in the game, or grow in that direction. So that was the meat I left for the GM. That was the little breadcrumbs I gave to the GM to follow.
Mhm.
So those are the kind of
Did
things
the
that you
GM
think
pick
about.
them up? Well, you said you never really got a chance to develop them
No,
too much, but did any of that start to appear? Did the
no, the
GM kind
GM
of
did
get
not
it?
pick them up.
Oh, no. Okay.
I, you can't blame every GM's got different styles, things they do,
Yeah.
things they don't do. Um, but if I'm running the game from 1 to 20, I'm going to be looking at stuff like that and thinking about, like, that's going to be the stuff I'm looking at and developing.
Yeah, and there's a kind of a nice point here is that all kinds of relationships are relevant in a backstory
Mhm.
because let's say that you want to set up a horrible enemy in the future. It doesn't mean that that enemy has to show up on their children, but it might be really helpful if you have a strong bond with a sibling or a friend or an uncle or somebody who then that villain can later get in trouble, and then that's going to bring your characters into the game.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of different things you can do with relationships. So we're talking about career, we're talking about relationships. What other kinds of things occur to you as good backstory material?
I think there should be a little bit of mystery and open-endedness to it. Like, don't write it in such a way that it closes the door behind you. You know, you want to leave avenues, as many avenues open as you can. Um, One of my players in the current game wrote what I would call a great montage. And I told him that.
Okay.
I said, "Hey, this is a great montage. It's awesome. It's like you're watching Rocky train, and
Yeah.
he's getting stronger, and it's really cool. It's a great scene. The music's going, yeah, yeah. And but the backstory was missing is that his trainer has a bad heart, could die, if he gets too intense in his next fight. His wife is pregnant. Like, it's missing all these elements that make that montage good.
So in other words, it's missing the other parts of his life, not just him getting stronger.
It's missing everything that a GM could use to
Mm.
flesh out and expand on that character. All it is a montage.
I take it that the point here, right, is that a good backstory is one that gives the GM places to go with story, and importantly, it doesn't answer all the questions
Mhm.
that might be present. The backstory I wrote for you for this Ganassi, I actually had a little moment where a genie inscribes a tattoo on his back, and he doesn't see it, and he doesn't know it's there. And so he might not actually discover what that is, who put it on him, what it means. I frankly don't even know what it amounts to either. But that's something that you as a GM can then work with and go,
Mhm.
that identifies him as a member of an order, or that is a secret spell that will go off when he turns 25, or whatever.
You only wrote like maybe 3 sentences of it. There was just very vague, which is
Mhm.
great. It gives me a lot of knowing that you wrote it vague, probably intently, because I know you could go into depth if you really
Sure.
wanted to, but leaving it kind of vague allows me to kind of fill in gaps that may not be there. Allows me to go places with it that could be exciting or it could be horrible. But
Or both.
the idea is that you're aware that you're leaving it vague and open so that it can be explored.
Yeah. I think a good player backstory is going to have strangers that come by through town and we don't know who they are. They're going to
Mhm.
have, weird things that you saw in the sky when you were 6 and that we don't know what they were, or maybe they were portentous omens people interpreted in different ways. And we're not really going to find out what they are
Mhm.
until your character's in adulthood. There may be weird artifacts that passed through town and changed somebody and then were lost again. There's so many things you can do. The trick here is to create enough open space that when those things are explained in the game, your character is hooked. You have a character who is invested in finding out what that thing is, rescuing the person, taking revenge on some other person, something that gets them the traction that you need to pull them into that story.
And for players, I really want to encourage you take that opportunity to make that backstory, kind of direct the GM into what kind of game you want, what kind of experience you want from this character. It's your real first opportunity to really kind of let them know what kind of game you want to have.
Yeah, I think this is one of those first moments where GMs and players collaborate and you start to learn a little bit about what the game's going to be. I
Mhm.
think GMs, you should be looking at all these player backstories and kind of figuring out, are these all compatible? We've talked a bit before about balancing players' character capabilities so that they're balanced, but it's also important to kind of balance tone.
Mhm.
If you've got one person who is super dark and has this super dark background, and you've got another person who is bright, happy, idyllic, and a fairy tale folk hero, those may not be easy to serve in the same game, and you might need to help those players kind of talk to each other and figure out in your session zero, is this what we want to do?
It's kind of one of the reasons why I started the game a little bit the way I did. Number one is we were kind of in a new type of terrain or kind of experience that we're going to be doing. Probably not quite like what we've done in the past with this kind of maybe um, English fantasy style game. A little bit
Yeah.
more. This is probably got a little bit more influences with Mesoamerican kind of stuff. So I really
Yep.
wanted to set the scene a little bit so you guys weren't all kind of like all making characters for something that was in your mind that wasn't there. So this allowed me to do a little bit of storytelling in the beginning to kind of show you guys the realm and what it's like, and then let you guys have that first experience with it, and then create once you've had that.
Yeah. Yeah. Importantly, if you're going to have Frodo and Sam go to the Aztec Empire or
Mhm.
something, you better like warn your players so that they're not really feeling out of their element. And they thought, I would have made something else if I'd known that's where we're going. So, yeah, another good reason to have a good session zero.
Real quick, Ben, do you have a favorite character backstory that you've ever made, like one that really sticks out for you?
Boy, that's a great question. Yeah, actually, but not. What's funny is it kind of breaks some of the rules that we've talked about here. I knew I was going to go into a Curse of Strahd game. This is one of my rotations through that module. So I had never played a Necromancer, and I thought, all right, I'm going to play a Necromancer. I'm kind of working my way through all the wizard types. So in this case, I played a Necromancer because I thought, what better place to go into the demi-plane of dread? What better character to have than somebody who's kind of familiar with the local color in that respect. So I made this character named Max Orlov von Ghoul, he's every bit the kind of vampiric looking, Nosferatu looking guy. And I kind of had it in his backstory that he was basically dropped off at the doorstep of a arcane library, of a kind of a candle keep, if you will. And he was raised there. He took care of the library. He started reading the books. Eventually he started reading a lot of the books. He spent a lot of time indoors, so he didn't have a big tan. Lost his hair early. Okay, so he's kind of bald. So imagine this kind of tan, pale person who's read all kinds of stuff and didn't really have the social life to tell him that like necromancy is kind of a forbidden thing. So he kind of read it the same way he read everything else.
Mhm.
Ultimately, then you've got somebody who looks for all the world like this kind of cadaverous character who is so confused as to why people are, shocked by him or think he himself may be undead or anything like that. And so
Oh,
he
fun.
was kind of fun to play as a little bit of an innocent character in that
Mhm.
respect. And we had a great time with him, but he was definitely more of a humor character. And the purpose of that backstory was to give him a kind of a gimmick in the game. He would also talk with a kind of Dracula style accent, but he was always wondering why it was everybody thought he was undead. I'm not. I'm leaving. I'm alive. Why do you guys keep talking this way?
Another great like Ben making a character solely so he can play an
That's
accent.
exactly right.
That's
So
I love it.
anyway, yeah, no, it was a great time, and we had a great time with Orlov, and that was a fun backstory. But that's a different kind of way of thinking about why you want to
Mhm.
put these kind of characters together in this way. It gives you a great character hook. Interestingly, there were maybe some elements of this that, like, if he's kind of like not clear about why it is that necromancy is not something that most people are willing to trifle with or countenance, like he was kicked out of town. They were like, we don't want that anywhere near us. And so he was kind of on the outskirts of town in a little shack that was kind of his house. And it gave us a lot of places to go with the story. And I think that's really what player backstories are about, is where
Yeah,
can you take the story?
yeah. I had one years ago that I really enjoyed. It was a guy named Tony. We
Hmm.
call him Toothless Tony. He worked as a bouncer at one of the bars,
Okay.
and Tony was
What,
kind
what,
of
what game was this? Is this
this is a game of D&D.
okay.
And he was a bouncer, and he worked at one of the taverns and stuff. And he was this kind of really dumb guy.
Those are some of my favorite characters to play.
He was really dumb. He was really fun, but he had a kind of a bit of a he had a problem. Like he was just always one of those guys that was down on his luck. He
Uh-huh.
had a dollar, he would lose it. He'd always try to like gamble it away, see if he could, strike it big, and he always failed. He failed at life, and he ended up adventuring because he just needed some money, and he kind of ran himself out of every job in town. But he had a daughter, and he had to like raise money so he could give to his ex. He had to kind of like, so he had this kind of mission of like, I'm going to do good by this girl of mine, even though he wasn't like really a big part of her life.
So Toothel suddenly had a heart of gold.
But he had no money, he had no gold, he had just had a heart of gold. So that was his whole point of adventuring, and it kind of like what I liked about it is it informed everything he did. He didn't really like punching people, like, but he would do it because like that's how he made his money.
That's how it works.
Yeah, so it was a great character idea, and it could have gone in a lot of different areas as the campaign would have progressed with his daughter and things like that. But it had a lot of good hooks for a GM, and it had a lot of
Yeah,
good things for the players to kind of like around the table to kind of rally around this heart of gold dumb guy.
that's excellent. Well, okay, so friends, we've talked about things to do, why you need these great backstories, maybe not keeping them too long and not answering all the questions, giving your GM some hooks and some story elements, give your GM some room to play.
Yeah, keep in tune with the theme of the game, guys. Don't go making a backstory for something that's not you know appropriate for that storyline or that campaign. Be mindful. Save that one for another game.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say this. There's so many games we're going to play that if you don't get it this time, you will get it some other time. And it's a good idea at this early stage. I mean, you're making backstories for your session zero, for your very first adventures. And if it doesn't quite fit at first, don't try to force it, right? Find the thing that works with the ensemble, with the GM's vision that you've got. You're going to have a better time if you do something that fits with that than you will if you get your way and then you feel like you're sort of plowing uphill through this whole thing is you try to serve this backstory that doesn't really fit with that group. And that doesn't mean just don't do dark. If you're in a group where everybody's doing dark stuff and you don't want to be that way, and I've been that guy, then you know what? You're going to have to kind of make that adjustment too. So
We think this is the DC universe, Ben?
yeah, that's right. Well, it's not the DC universe, but I liked Superman. I thought that was a good movie.
I gotta go check it out.
Yeah. Hey, we're going to come back in a couple weeks and talk about crafting. We've got some thoughts about that. It's going to be different from our episode on items because in this case, we're really focusing on the making and how it works and why it's interesting and why you might want to do it and other things like that. So stay tuned and we will see you in a couple of weeks for another episode of Tabletop Tune-Up. Until then, keep those dice rolling.
Soda!